Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Camel, and more importantly, welcome back to the Elder Scrolls Detective series. A series in which we investigate, curate, speculate, hypothesize, theorize, and quite often simply highlight and discuss cool, interesting, and hidden things that can be found within the Elder Scrolls games. And boy oh boy will all of those boxes be ticked during this video. Links to my other Elder Scrolls Detective videos can be found down in the description, along with links for all of my social media. Check them out after this investigation. As the subject we will be deconstructing, reconstructing, and inspecting is a mystical monolith with magical roots running deep within the more obscure realms of the Elder Scrolls lore, and we will be untangling those very roots. In fact, this is by far the most lore-heavy video I've ever made, and for good reason, as we are dealing with an entity I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but very few of you truly know. Today we will of course be investigating the Sleeping Tree. In the mid-south of the Hold of Whiterun, amidst the warm rolling tundra palette, an ethereal and ghost-like contrast of colour sits peacefully in a small pond. This location is known as Sleeping Tree Camp. As we can see on the map, it lies roughly between the city of Whiterun and the township of Rorikstead, which we all know and love. This is the Sleeping Tree. Straight away, we know something is different about this so-called Sleeping Tree. Crooked, bare, violet and grey, a gnarled and fractaled wooden claw reaching from below, grasping for the hollow sky above. Yet still, it captures us. Yet still, it is beautiful. We've never seen anything like this in the Elder Scrolls before. The water in the pool that lies beneath it has assumed an unusual, or perhaps even unnatural colour, with a faded lavender tinge. I'm sure the xylem of the Sleeping Tree lent some of its sap, giving the water its unique coloration. There is also a rather heavy and pale mauvine mist, ephemerally fluttering with a lazy proximity, just another unworldly aspect of this Sleeping Tree. By night, the tree goes from bone and violet to black and a deep, pulsating indigo. Unquestionably awe-inspiring and alluring, yet odd to a degree. Some say that the Sleeping Tree is in fact a Hist, but if we remember the history from the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion that was being harvested by the Blackwood Company, it looks like a normal tree, brown, it's got green leaves and produces a bright golden sap. Hist sap. None of those characteristics are seen with the Sleeping Tree. So is it a Hist tree? No, it's not. But it is. But it's not quite. But it kinda is. A strange answer, I know, but rest assured that will be explained in full detail later on in the video when we dive into the lore required to understand the Sleeping Tree. And as strange as it is, the Sleeping Tree also boasts another unique feature. A spigot? What? This thing has a tap jammed into the side of it? Call me crazy, but something tells me this didn't just happen to grow here. Someone has come and wedged a spigot into the side of the Sleeping Tree. And for what? Some purple tree juice? No thank you. Well, let's see what happens when we turn this thing. Ah, we got a bottle of Sleeping Tree sap. Health is increased by 100 points for 45 seconds. Well, I must admit that is actually a pretty useful potion to have. And it's also worth 100 gold. That's pretty nice too, to be honest. So I suppose I see why someone stuck a spigot into the side of the Sleeping Tree, given its sap is actually pretty useful and valuable. Not quite satisfied though. Let's have a look around and see if there is anything else we can find to help us understand the Sleeping Tree. Just a short distance from the pond, there is actually a cave here at Sleeping Tree Camp. Let's check it out. Inside, there is actually a second giant, and while the room is small and has several points of interest, we'll soon notice that there is a dead Orzammar in here. Looks like he had his head smashed in with a giant's club. We've all been there. This is an orc named Ulag. On his corpse we can find some Sleeping Tree sap, which means he knew about the tree and the potential medicinal and monetary values of its sap. There's also a message from Isolde, which reads as follows. Don't try to stiff me on this deal, Ulag. I can talk the Khajiit caravans into a better price than you be able to. And the guards are still looking for you after that little skooma incident. Remember that, Ulag? Just bring the sap to me in Whiterun like we discussed. Isolde. Well, we better confront her with this and let her know that her accomplice has been slain. So back to Skyrim's trade capital, Whiterun we go. More specifically to the trade district and marketplace. Here is where we can find her. Hey.
Once I've made enough money trading with the Khajiit caravans, I'm going to buy the bannered mare from Hulda.
Brilliant. Look, I found this note on Ulag's body.
Did you? So Ulag didn't make it past those giants then? More's the pity. If you found any of the sap, I'd be willing to pay you the same cut I offered him. Better price than you are likely to find otherwise.
What can you tell me about it? You know, the sleeping tree sap. Why do you care about it?
How the tree came to grow there is a bit of a mystery. Some say that when Vardenfell erupted, a piece was blown to the middle of Skyrim and from the crater grew the tree. I've also heard that it was a spore that fell from an island floating in the sky, but that just sounds like nonsense. All I know is that the sap makes you feel as healthy as a cave troll, but slow as a drunk horker, and that it fetches good coin.
A floating island in the sky, that's just silly, right? Wrong. Not only is it true, but it is very heavily veiled in lore, which I'm going to explain. Because to make any educated deductions or judgments about the sleeping tree, we must know 3 key components of Elder Scrolls lore to fully understand it. And while they will all seem completely unconnected and irrelevant, trust me, we need to know these teachings in order to truly understand what we're dealing with here, to truly understand the sleeping tree. So the 3 key lore components are the Hist, the Ingenium, and Umbra. While you may or may not be familiar with all or any of these topics, I will explain all of them in intriguing detail. So, firstly, the Hist. The Hist are an ancient race of sentient trees that are said to have originally come from another plane of existence. They were once spread across all of Nirn, but now they are almost solely found within Blackmarsh. And this has been the case for some time. Because of their long history within Argonia, the Hist are associated with the Argonians, who venerate them, meaning the Hist are essentially living gods that the Argonians can interact with on a physical and metaphysical level. Amazingly, the Hist are all interconnected with one another. This allows them to communicate and act as a single mind, while still remaining as separate entities. The link they share also allows them to operate in unison, suggesting a monolithic mindset, a hive mind, an unbelievably powerful tool to be used when necessary. Famously, the Hist produce a sap that is used by Argonians in a variety of cultural practices, as it is a sacred and religious substance of great power and knowledge. While less commonly, it is also prized by the other races of Tamriel as an alchemical ingredient and in some cases as a hallucinogenic substance. But non-Argonians must be cautious, as Hist sap can be poisonous when consumed in large enough doses. Now, the Hist sap is much more than a simple ingredient or fun narcotic. Hist sap bears very powerful properties. While the consumer might feel that they are gaining from it, most of the benefits are in the Hist tree's favor. When someone ingests the Hist sap, the Hist it came from can communicate with, control, and draw knowledge from those who have ingested the Hist sap. In extreme circumstances, the Hist have actually communicated with the entire Argonian race, as well as altering large numbers of them when they ingest this mysterious Hist sap, altering them to the Hist's will, that is. An example of this was just before the Oblivion Crisis. The Hist of Blackmarsh telepathically recalled most of the Argonians across Tamriel back to Blackmarsh in preparation for the incoming Oblivion Crisis. Now, it should be noted that the incoming Oblivion Crisis was not something that many knew of except the Hist. How they knew this is unknown, but an unquestionably and scarily vague yet powerful ability to foresee interdimensional disaster. Because the history called most Argonians to Black Marsh and had them prepare for the incoming invasion, a leading force was needed. This is when a military and political faction called the an-xileel rose to the challenge, uniting Argonians under one traditionalist and nativistic faction. This new power, the an-xileel, with the numbers of the Argonians and the puppet masters being the Hist, resulted in the complete domination of the Oblivion Crisis in Blackmarsh. In fact, the an-xileel forces were so vicious and relentless that the Daedra commanders had to close all of the Oblivion gates within Blackmarsh for fear of being overrun by the an-xileel armies. While saving the day, the Hist's powers and motives are unknown, making them a potential threat. And again, while saving the day, the an-xileel take their orders directly from the Hist, which is unnerving because the an-xileel have genocidal, nationalistic and nativistic political motives and views. So in short, the an-xileel are actually a scary political faction, again controlled entirely by the Hist, who, as we've discovered, are even more scary, as they're the ones making the an-xileel do all this. But what's this got to do with the sleeping tree? Don't worry, we'll come back to the Hist and the an-xileel in a minute, but for now, the second piece of lore we must understand. That is the Ingenium. Going back a bit, during the Second Era, a small moonlet known as Bar Dao is thought to have been flung from the void by Sheogorath, although there are many other theories, such as it being a former Magna Gi Una, another suggesting it is an egg that will hatch the children of Mologbal and Vivek. Another claims that Bar Dao is in fact Malakath's dung. Regardless of its origin, its story remains the same. Bar Dao came through the sky. It hurtled towards the great city of Vivek while it was still under construction. But Vivek, the tribunal poet warrior god, the very being the city of Vivek is named after, he used his divine powers to stop Bar Dao in place, suspended in the sky, purely by Vivek's divine will. He then elected to keep Bar Dao above his city to inspire everlasting faith among his followers. If you read between the lines, if the city's people ever ceased to love him, then Bar Dao would fall and destroy them. Now suspended, the moonlet was turned into the Ministry of Truth, a hall of justice and a prison. However, many years later, during the end of the Third Era, when the Oblivion Crisis initiated, the tribunal god Vivek vanished. His whereabouts are unknown. With his departure, the Ministry of Truth became unstable as Vivek was no longer there to hold it up. The destruction of the city and perhaps even Vardenfell was impending. What were they going to do? Well, two Dunmer rose to the occasion, Vuhon and Esmar Sul. They made a pact with the Daedric prince Clavicus Vile, through which a device known as the Ingenium was created and installed within the Ministry of Truth. With Clavicus Vile's powers, the Ingenium would sustain the suspension of the Ministry of Truth above the city of Vivek, but of course, at a cost. Souls, the fuel of the Daedric princes. At first, the souls of the dead were used to power the Ingenium. Soon they had to turn to living soul sacrifices, a cost most likely greater than the outcome. 5 years had passed, and one day, Vuhon tried to sacrifice Sul's wife, Ilzaven, placing her into the Ingenium for her soul to be used as fuel. Of course, Sul attempted to save her, much against the will of Vuhon. However, this failed. During the struggle, the Ingenium was damaged. Vuhon and Sul were sucked through the rift veil and pulled into the realm of Clavicus Vile. Sul's wife, along with the broken Ingenium, remained on Bar Dao, the Ministry of Truth. It then fell, crashing into the city of Vivek, wiping it off the face of Nirn. The impact was so great, it triggered the eruption of Red Mountain. This is how the Red Year happened, the destruction of Vardenfell, the mass immigration of Dunmer, and the now ever-active Red Mountain spewing its ash across the lands. But for this investigation, we must remember that Sul and Wuhon are now in the realm of oblivion belonging to Clavicus Vile, appropriately and rather boringly named the Realm of Clavicus Vile. And what's this got to do with the sleeping tree? Don't worry, we'll get back to the Ingenium, Wuhon and Sul in a minute. As for now, the third piece to the lore puzzle, Umbra, a name I'm sure that riles up some fond memories. At some point in history, Clavicus Vile decided he wanted an artifact forged, to be used in his name and to harvest souls to be sent back to his realm. Finding a smith who could craft such a powerful weapon proved to be a tough task. Although, one day, an ancient witch named Nainra Ware offered to forge the blade for Clavicus Vile, which she did. The sword, however, was unstable. In an attempt to fix this, the Daedric Prince Clavicus Vile imbued the blade with a piece of his own power, which stabilized the sword, but unknowingly made it more powerful than he intended, as Clavicus Vile had actually been tricked by Nainra. By putting a fragment of his own power into the blade, what he had actually done is made the blade sentient. He had created the entity known as Umbra. A free-thinking and freely acting sword, Umbra proved to be troublesome, constantly rebelling against Clavicus Vile, hiding from him and falling into the possession of powerful warriors, often driving them mad. But Umbra was destined to return to Clavicus Vile, as at the end of the Third Era, the champion of Cyrodiil, the character you play in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, retrieved Umbra and brought it back to Clavicus Vile, in return for his famed mask. Now once again in his possession, Umbra was sent back to Clavicus Vile's realm, although again it proved to be trouble. Once in Oblivion, Umbra cut away another piece of Clavicus's power for itself. This extra power of the Daedric Prince Clavicus Vile allowed the mind of Umbra to separate from the sword, as it took the form of a dark being, in the shape of a human but with eyes like the void. While the physical sword still exists, it only serves as a prison for the sentient being that is Umbra, and is now free from that very prison. Clavicus Vile, however, would not let that damned Umbra escape him again. He actually reshaped his entire realm of oblivion and changed its walls, so Umbra could not escape him again. So, while he couldn't escape, Umbra was able to conceal himself within a city near the edge of Vile's realm, as he feared Clavicus would imprison him within the sword once again. While in hiding, Umbra had noted the great influx of souls coming into Clavicus Vile's realm from the Rift Veil that was connected to the Ingenium, which we spoke of earlier. And when the Ingenium was damaged, the Rift Veil tore and became larger, just large enough for Umbra to throw the sword, his prison, through the Rift Veil and back to Mundus, back to Nirn. This dimensional separation of the being Umbra and the sword Umbra meant that it would be almost impossible for Clavicus Vile to imprison Umbra within the sword again. So in broad strokes, Umbra was now a free being and had security attached to that freedom. And here's where all the puzzle pieces come together. At this same moment, when Umbra thrust the sword out of Clavicus Vile's realm and back to Mundus, in completely opposite fashion from Mundus, the two Dunmer we spoke of earlier, Sul and Wuhon, were pulled through the Rift Veil into Clavicus Vile's realm. Here, Sul and Wuhon were met by Umbra. While Sul was imprisoned, Umbra and Wuhon struck a deal. If Umbra would spare him, Wuhon would build another Ingenium, which Umbra could use to escape the Daedric Prince Clavicus Vile, as it would tear a piece of Vile's realm away. Essentially, Wuhon's new Ingenium would twist a part of Clavicus Vile's realm of oblivion, sending it into flight and rendering the new barriers to trap Umbra entirely moot. Umbra and Wuhon created a city called Umbriel, a floating city powered by the new Ingenium. Wuhon and Umbra fused, and placed their joined souls into the new Ingenium. While still two separate entities, they were also joined, and this joint entity was also known as Umbriel, the ruler of the floating city of Umbriel. And while it sounds intriguing, Umbriel was a devastating creation, as anyone killed below the floating city would have their souls harvested to power the Ingenium, to sustain the floating city and thereby satisfy the pact made by Wuhan with Umbra. This floating, soul-fueled city of Umbriel actually has a strangely familiar forest and ecosystem atop it. While the realm from which the Hist originated is unknown, just as they found their way to Mundus and to Nirn, they also found their way to other planes of existence, one of which is the Plane of Oblivion, Clavicus Vile's realm. And while a forest of Hist-like trees is a beautiful thought, it actually proved to be one of Umbriel's most dangerous aspects. As in the 40th year of the Fourth Era, the Argonian political faction, the an-xileel, via the Hist of Blackmarsh, contacted the Hist-like trees atop Umbriel and summoned the city to Tamriel, subsequently forging a path and allowing the city of Umbriel to come through to Mundus. The an-xileel planned on using Umbriel's soul-harvesting mechanics to cull all non-Argonians from Blackmarsh. Now, if you do wish to learn more about all of this Umbriel stuff, there are actually 2 books by Greg Keyes that cover all of this. Feel free to check them out. But for now, we near the end of the lore required to understand the Sleeping Tree. So while Umbriel floated around Tamriel, causing havoc, a spore from the Hist-like forest atop the city fell. It fell to the ground of Skyrim, Whiterun, into this giant's camp. It grew into what we now know as the Sleeping Tree. So this isn't a Hist tree, it's a distant relative of the Hist from another plane of existence. That's why it's grey, looks dead and glows purple, unlike the familiar brown and green Hist from Nirn that boast a golden glow. But now we fully understand this line.
I've also heard that it was a spore that fell from an island floating in the sky, but that just sounds like nonsense.
It did fall from a floating island, so that's great. All that lore, that's fantastic. But what does that mean? Why is it important that we understand the full history of the tree? Well, because it's really scary. The Hist found on Nirn have proven to have genocidal motives, as they control the an-xileel, and the an-xileel do some scary things, like wiping out all other races. Not only that, but the Hist have proven to behold great powers. Mass racial telepathy, interdimensional telepathy, with the Hist-like trees of Umbriel, foreseeing the incoming Oblivion crisis and so on. The Hist are unquestionably powerful, and with that said, even the Hist that call Tamriel home seem to not care about destroying the fellow races. So what kind of motives does a Hist tree from another dimension have? Well, we really don't know, but given the track record of the Hist we do know, I don't have high hopes. Now, not only does it have completely unknown motives and powers, but remember, Isolde says that the Hist sap from the Sleeping Tree is very valuable and sought after, which means not only are the people of Skyrim drinking the stuff, but they also are willing to pay good money for it, which just means that it's rare and people go out of their way to get some, which is pretty creepy. Drinking the sap from the Sleeping Tree is quite literally like eating the fruit from a tree that grew from something that fell off a spaceship. Don't consume it. Oh, and let's not forget that these trees can communicate, draw knowledge from, and even control those who consume their sap. We have a bunch of people in Skyrim drinking mind-controlled juice from a tree from another dimension whose relatives from this dimension are genocidal, so what the hell is this tree planning? Also, because the Hist are all connected, when one of them goes rogue, the other Hist destroy it. And while the Sleeping Tree isn't quite a Hist tree, the Hist of Tamriel can communicate with it and are aware of its presence, just like the regular Hist. So for the Hist of Blackmarsh to have not destroyed this tree, then the Sleeping Tree must share the ideologies of the other Hist, which, as we know, are genocidal, as seen through the actions of the an-xileel who were controlled by the Hist. Of course, while not a complete confirmation, the boiling down of all the information we have leads us to believe, or at least suspect, that the sleeping tree is equally as threatening in its unknown motives as the rest of the Hist on Tamriel. And maybe even more so, it's from another plane of existence altogether, so we really aren't aware of its unique and unseen abilities, if it does have any. Again, people drinking this thing's tree sap, it can communicate with those people, it can draw knowledge from those people, it can even control them. So this sleeping tree, is it a cool purple plant, or is it a genuinely scary interdimensional Hist? Is it just a cool nod to the books, or is it acting as a Hist spy in Skyrim? I mean, it could very well be controlling the giants here at the camp. After all, the sleeping tree's sap flooded all into this little pond of water here, probably the water the giants drank from. So they have a sip of water, unknowingly consume some of the sap, and now the giants are under the control of the sleeping tree. You know, there could be some people in Skyrim who wish to destroy the tree. Well, guess what? That's going to be really hard now that there's a band of giants protecting it. Look, who knows? The sleeping tree could be absolutely harmless. Or it could be a foothold within Skyrim, a beacon of control and information, communicating with the other Hist of Tamriel. I think the Dwemer had it right. Cut down the Hist. Okay, that's a bit extreme. But an interdimensional Hist that fell from a soul-fueled city of genocide, look. I wouldn't want that thing in my garden, but what do you think? This is actually really interesting because the sleeping tree could go so far in either direction. It could just be a tree, or it could be an interdimensional beacon of genocide. I mean, that's a pretty big gap there. So I do hope that you've enjoyed the journey, the discovery, and the deep plunge into Elder Scrolls lore revolving around the sleeping tree. Equally so, I hope that you've learnt something new about the beautifully mad universe that these wonderful games take place in. But most importantly, what do you think about the sleeping tree? Harmless, a beacon of genocide waiting for the signal, maybe it's somewhere in between. If you do have any ideas, facts, information, evidence, speculation, theories, or anything to do with the sleeping tree, of course be sure to put your comment down below. I'd love to read it. If you do have any ideas for something that should be covered in an Elder Scrolls Detective video, be sure to let me know. I'll look into whatever strange and wonderful topics you present. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a kindness and leave a like. Leave a comment with your Elder Scrolls Detective ideas and your thoughts on the sleeping tree. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos similar to this one, please subscribe. It helps me know that people enjoy this kind of videos and in the long run will result in more of them. Of course, be sure to click the little bell icon next to the subscribe button right here on YouTube so you are notified when new Elder Scrolls Detective videos are uploaded. My other Elder Scrolls Detective video links can be found in the description. Down there is also links to my social media. If you would like to support the channel in a more personal way, you can become a patron on Patreon. As I'm sure you know, all of my time and energy goes into making these videos I create for you to enjoy, so your support is most appreciated and welcomed in any and all forms. Feel free to check out the playlist on screen. Thanks for watching, thank you for supporting the channel, and I will see you very shortly in the next video. I'll see you there soon.